Hey, what's up? Richard Roseman here. Welcome back to another exciting tutorial. Today we're going to go over how to rig a character with my brand new After Effects plugin, IK Studio, which is a powerful and flexible inverse kinematics solver for character animation. I'm going to show you how to rig up a character to do this really nice walk cycle. We're not going to do the animation part, but rather focus on the rigging portion so that you can get a solid understanding of how easy it is to rig up a character with IK Studio. Alright, having said that, let's jump into it. I'm going to go to my starter comp here called Rig. You can see I've got my basic layers, and I'm going to go through these one by one so we can take a look. The first is the ground layer. You can see that's nothing more than just a line shape created in After Effects. Next we've got the head. You can see I've masked it out from the rest of the body. I've got the hands, also masked out, and the torso, once again masked out from the rest of the body. You don't need to have your shapes masked out, but you can create them in Illustrator, bring them in one layer at a time. I've got the right foot, which is an After Effects shape, and I've got the left foot, which is another After Effects shape. And finally the background. You can see if I disable it, the transparency shows through. I'm going to get started by creating my main waist null. To do that, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object, and we're going to see our null here. One thing I don't like in After Effects is how it centers my null to the top left-hand corner. I don't like working that way. So I'm going to press A for anchor, and I'm going to center it by entering 50-50. I'm then going to press S for scale, and I'm going to reduce the size to 50% because I want a smaller null to work with. Finally, I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to call it waist null. Let me move that up to the top. Now I'm going to position it a little bit better to where I want it in my character, someplace closer to represent a waist. We can start attaching now. I'm going to grab the torso, and I'm going to attach it to my waist null. Now if I move that around, our head's going to stay behind. So we want to attach our head as well. There's two ways we could do it. We could attach our head also to the waist null, or we could attach the head to the torso since the torso is attached to the waist. That's a bit more intuitive, so I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to grab the head, and I'm going to attach it to the torso. Now if I move my waist, we've got both of those layers moving around. The upper body is complete for now, so now I'm going to start working with the feet. I'm going to create two more nulls, one for the right foot and one for the left foot. I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object. I'm going to press A again, center it with 50-50, press S, reduce the scale to 50%, and press enter, and I'm going to call it right foot null. I'm going to position this one closer to the right foot. And instead of going through the same process to do the left foot one, I'm actually going to select the right foot. I'm going to click on duplicate. I'm going to press enter and call it left foot null. And I'm going to position it where the left foot is. Now I've got my three main nulls. This is looking good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press P so it displays the property value for each. Same with the right one, and same with the waist. At this point, I think I'm ready to create my leg and start using IK Studio. So to do that, I need a new layer. I'm going to go to Layer, New, Solid. And I'm going to call this right leg. To launch IK Studio, I simply go to Effect, Richard Roseman, IK Studio. You can see it immediately makes the background transparent, and it renders our IK chain. First thing you'll notice is that the direction's wrong. It's facing to the left, we want it to be facing to the right. So we can simply go to the direction parameter and change it from -1 to 1. Now, I'm going to start attaching these. And what I need to do is I'm going to attach the parent point to the waist null, and the child point to the right foot null. So I'm going to open this up. We're going to open the effects, IK Studio, and here we can see the parent position and the child position. And we can see they each have their property pickwick. Let's start by grabbing the parent position pickwick and dragging it to the waist null position. I'm going to let go and you can see how it turns red. This means it's been attached. You can also see the parent position jumped to the waist null. Let's do the same for the child position. We're going to grab the property point and drag it to the right foot position. Now if I close this, select our waist null and move it around, you can see we've actually got a working attachment. It's not correct with regards to color or length or size, but we'll get to that next. I'm going to click on the right leg. I'm going to open the parent limb and the child limb. I'm going to start making adjustments. First, for the parent thickness, I'm going to set it to 75. And for the parent length, I'm going to set it to 140. For the child thickness, I'm going to set it to about 10. And I'm going to set the length to around 150. This is because I want to taper in the leg. This is looking better. If I grab my waist null, move it around, we've got a much better effect working here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition the layer because I want the leg to be behind the torso. So I'm going to grab the right leg and I'm going to drag it behind the torso layer. So that's looking good. Now if we take a look at our walk cycle, our reference, you can see that the leg has a hemline. It's like a pant, and underneath it we can see the sock. There's a couple ways to do this using IK Studio, but I'm going to show you the simplest way. We're going to use the sleeve effect, and we're going to turn on a long sleeve, which you can see draws a secondary spline on top. We're going to make the fill color the same purple as the foot. And we're going to make this length about 14 so that it goes right near the bottom. Now, if I deselect that, you can see that the underneath spline is still yellow. We don't want that. We want that to be a sock. So let's change that. I'm going to click again on the right leg layer, click on fill color. Let's make it white. That's looking good. And finally, once again, if we look at it clearly, you can see that it's got a rounded cap, whereas we want it to have a butt cap, a straight line. So we can change that by going to the child limb and selecting butt cap. Let's view it, and it's looking good. All right, next thing we want, if we take a look at our reference, is a seam. So we do that by selecting IK Studio. We go to sleeve seam. We turn on enabled. Right now it's using the default color of stroke, but we can change that to our own custom color. Let's make it white. And we can see that it's a little too thick. So I'm going to change from stroke thickness to custom, and I'm going to set it to 1. Great. Let's test this again. I'm going to select our waist null, move it around, and it's looking good. And if I select our right foot null and I move it around, it's looking good. Obviously, we need to attach the feet to the right foot null. So we're going to do that next. I'm going to click on right foot, and I'm going to press P for position. And I'm going to click on left foot, and I'm going to press P for position. I'm going to select the right foot position property pickwick, and I'm going to drag it to the right foot null position. You can see it turns red, so it's being attached. I'm going to do the same for the left foot. Grab the property pickwick, scroll up to the left foot null position. Now, if I move the right foot null, we've got both our leg and the foot attached properly. If I move the left foot null, we should have our left foot attached properly. So this is working really good. I'd say we have our one leg done, which is called right leg. And what we could do here are two things. We could go through the whole process again start from scratch to do the left leg, or we can just duplicate it, which is much easier, faster, and what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate. I'm going to press Enter, and I'm going to call this left leg. And I'm going to open this one up. Take a look at IK Studio. And obviously, we don't see it because we've now got two legs, one on top of the other. If we open the parent position, we can see that it's linked to the waist null, and that's correct. We want the left leg to also be linked to the waist. If we open the child position, we can see it's linked to the right foot null. That's not what we want. We want it to be linked to the left foot null. So I can simply adjust this expression, change right to left, and now we've got both legs fully working. Let's close this. Let's select our waist null, move the waist, and it's looking good. Let's move our right foot. It's looking good. And let's move our left foot, and it's looking good. Now, one thing is, I want the left leg to be the rear leg. I want it to be in perspective at the back. Right now it's in front. So I'm going to grab it and I'm going to stick it behind the right leg. Now we've got a right leg as the main one. And the other thing I want to do is I want to change the color of the left leg because I want it to be in the distance, so I want it to be darker to suggest that. Just like the left foot is darker than the right foot. So I'm going to go to our sleeve. I'm going to click on the color and I'm going to reduce the brightness to maybe something like this. Similarly, I want to affect the seam and make it a little darker. So I'm going to click on that white and maybe I'll give it a hint of purple as well, but darker, something like that. Great. So I'm pretty happy with this. We've got both our legs working and they work really well. So I think now we can move to our arms. The arms is going to be a very similar process, if not identical. The only difference is that we're going to have two different shoulders. So let's start with the right arm. I'm going to go and make new nulls for that. So layer, new, null object, and press A for anchor, center it, S for scale, reduce it, and rename this to right arm shoulder. And I'm going to move it to around here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to call this left arm shoulder. Now for perspective, I want this one to be a little bit to the right side. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more null for the hands. So I'm going to duplicate this one more time, edit, duplicate, and let's rename this and we'll call it hands null. And I'm going to move this one over here to where the hands are. So let's go through our process again and do the basic attachments. Let's start with the hands attaching to the hand null. I'm going to press hand null and display the property position. And I'm going to go to my hands graphic and press P for position. And I'm going to grab the property position, drag it to my hands position, and you can see it's turned red, so it's linked. Now if I grab my hands null and I move it around, the hands will follow. Now I want the shoulder nulls to remain locked to the torso. So I'm going to grab both of those, left arm shoulder, right arm shoulder, and like we did with the head, I'm going to attach them to the torso. Now if I move my waist null, you can see the shoulders also move with it. Alright, I think at this point we're now ready to use IK Studio to create the arms. So I'm going to go and create a new layer and I'm going to call this right arm. And I'm going to go to Effect, Richard Rosenman, IK Studio, And once again, we've got our IK chain here. And you can see that in this case, it's actually pointing to the correct position, the correct direction. So let's do some attachments. I'm going to open this up, open IK Studio, look at the parent position, and let's just go to our shoulders and press P for position, and let's start linking. So my right arm's parent position should be attached to the right arm shoulder. Now, why did this happen? You can see that my IK Studio jumped to the left-hand corner. This is important, and the reason is because when you attach IK Studio, or in fact any layer, to another object that's already been linked to another one, such as the case of the shoulder which has been linked to the torso, it's inheriting its local position. We don't want that. We want it to inherit the world position to have an accurate placement. So there's a solution for that. If I go to the IK Studio webpage and we scroll down to documentation, there's a section here which explains about why that happens. And here it shows you the expression to use if we want to correct it. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to press Control C for copy. I'm going to go back to our After Effects comp. I'm going to open up the parent position, and I'm going to replace the expression here, which is right arm shoulder, with the correct one. I have to rename the null attachment to right arm shoulder, and voila, you can see that it's now linked properly. Again, this only happens when you attach an object to another layer which has already been attached to something else. Okay, so now let's close that and let's attach our child position to the hands, which is hands null. So I'm going to grab the property Pickwick, attach it to hands null, and you can see it snaps into place. If we did everything correct, now if I move my waist null, we should have both our legs and our arm working correctly, which we do. So that's really great. So now it's time to start making our creative adjustments to the arm. I'm going to open up the parent limb and the child limb, and I'm going to set the starting thickness to 44 and the length to 100, and the child, let's set it to 18 and 90. And I think I want to give it some curvature. Let's set that to 25%. That's looking good. Now I want the arm to be the same color as the body. So I'm going to adjust the color and set it to that. And of course now we can't see it, but we want a stroke around it. So I'm going to go to stroke. I'm going to enable the stroke, and I'm going to make it on the sides only. That way we leave the top and the bottom open. I'm going to change the color to white, and I'm going to set the thickness for the stroke to 1. So that's looking good. I think I want to make some adjustments to my shoulders because it's peeking out a little bit. So I'm going to grab my left shoulder and right shoulder. Let's move those down a little. That looks good. And now let's do another test. If I grab my waist null, that's looking good. Now if we take a look at our inspirational one, you can see that the hand is actually sitting behind the right arm. So I'm going to grab the right arm, and I'm going to put it underneath hands. There we go. So now I think we're ready to do the backhand. So once again, I could go through the whole process again, or I can just do something simpler, and that is to duplicate the right arm with Edit Duplicate. Hit Enter, so we can call it left arm. And now open Effects, IK Studio, and review our expressions. both arms need to be linked to the hands null, and that's already done for the child. But the parent shouldn't be attached to the right shoulder, it should be attached to the left shoulder. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to change right to left. And you can see that it snaps to the left shoulder null. Let's close this. Now, obviously we've got our left hand on top of our right, and that's incorrect. So that just requires us to grab the left hand and shuffle it so that it's behind the torso. And that's looking better. We can see the shoulders peeking out through here, which we don't want. So I'm going to grab left arm shoulder null, and I'm going to tuck it back there. So that's looking better. Now we can see just a hint of our left arm at the back here, but sometimes that's not enough and we want to cheat it. So I'm going to take some creative liberty and make an adjustment to that. I'm going to grab our left arm, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shorten it so we can see it a bit more. Instead of a length of 100 for the parent, I'm going to set it to 80, and for the child maybe 80 as well. So now we can see it back there, but it's blending in with the body. So let's grab the color like our rear leg. Let's darken the yellow a little bit, and now we have a bit of contrast. So that's looking really good. Let's do a test again with our waist null. We move it around. The legs are behaving as they should. The arms are behaving as they should. If we grab our hands null and we move that around, it's also working as it should. So this is looking really good to me. And I'd say we finished here. One other thing I want to show you is if we click on walk cycle, I've got this nice little tonal shading here, a shadow from the arm. And it really adds some depth, and it's not tough to do, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's go back to our rig, and let's go to our right arm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this once again. So we've got two right arms sitting on top of each other. I'm going to grab the one that's at the bottom, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little bit longer for both the parent and the child limb. What that's going to do is, because both start and end points are bound, it's going to push the center of it outwards a bit more. So let's do parent length of 120 and a child length of, let's say, 110. That's looking good. Let's disable the stroke. We don't want it. Let's adjust the color so that it's a gray, light gray, and change the compositing mode to multiply. That's looking good too. Now we've got a problem where the shadow doesn't just stay over the torso, we can see it on the background. That's really easy to fix. We're just going to mask the layer, which we're going to call arm shadow, and we're going to mask it according to the torso using this system here. When I do that, it's going to turn off the torso layer by default, which is what After Effects tends to do. We don't want that, so let's turn it back on. And now you can see our shadow is limited just to the torso. And of course it's interactive, so if we move our hands null, we've got our shadow working correctly and visible only over the torso. And at this point, we finished our character rig. So you can animate now any portion you want. If we take a look at our walk cycle again, you can see that I've done a little bit of further refinement to the animation. If you look at the feet, you can see that there's toes. The toes are animated. And I've done that by creating additional layers for toes and linking those to the feet. And you can see that if we look at the head and the neck, those are animated separately. We've got some basic animation on the hands, going both up and down and rotation. And we've got also rotation on the upper body, the torso, so that it moves forward and back as he does the walk cycle. I hope that gave you a pretty good understanding of how to do basic rigging with IK Studio. It's really not tough at all. You can see it's fast, and the way you rig it is entirely dependent on your workflow. So there's a million ways to do any character rig. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy using IK Studio.